Hi, I'm here with Ruth Levy Abramson, who I've come in contact with via the Gateway Women community. And I first became aware of Ruth from a group talk she did with Jodie Day on diversity and childlessness. And Ruth is a woman who is childless and happens also to be Jewish. And I thought it'd be really interesting to have a conversation with her around childlessness, race, and religion. I've been doing a lot of conversations, having a lot of conversations with my Black friends, some Asian women around how religion, in a way, and culture impacts on our grief. So I thought it'd be great to have Ruth's perspective, bringing her experience as a Jewish woman onto this platform. Now, just as a short introduction, I think Ruth has got this really great CV, so I really have to say this and read it out. But she's an accomplished singer-songwriter. She's a holistic singing coach. I really want to come and get some holistic singing coaching. She's a musician and yoga teacher. Ruth and her husband moved from New York to live in Israel. And Ruth has set up the first Gateway Women meetup group and Facebook group in Israel, and which appears to be the first and only support childless network for women who are childless not by choice in Israel. Have I got that right?
I think so.
Cool. Now, also, what I do know about Ruth is she's new to speaking about her childless journey. And one of the things about you, Ruth, is that I remember you mentioning on the diversity and childlessness talk that you felt that you should keep it quiet if you don't have a miracle baby story. So I'd like to come a bit onto that a bit more in as we go along in our conversation. But I thought it'd be really great if you could start by sharing your own story with us.
Yeah, well, hi. Diving in.
I know, I was starting the tough bits.
In a nutshell, is that I never imagined that I would be childless, not by choice. I simply never imagined that that was a possibility. I thought everything was in my control and I had choices. And if I wanted, I could become a mother. And when I finally found my soulmate, it seemed perfectly obvious that the next step was that we do what all the Jewish couples around us were doing, which was start a family. And we discussed in one of our first dates how many children we wanted. And I wanted 4. He wanted 5 because he came from a family of 5. But we settled on 4. So I was already on the right track to getting everything I wanted. And, I thought I had all the time that I needed to get that done. I remember when I got married, I was 35 years old. And I felt as if I had slid under the closing garage doors of,
meeting someone and getting married.
I made it just in time.
Yeah.
And now I can have a couple of kids. I didn't know that fertility drops so rapidly. I thought 35 was extremely viable.
Yeah.
My mother had me when she was 34. So I said, what's the difference? 34, 35, 37, 38. What does it matter? Even 40 seemed fine. I had a student whose mother got pregnant all of a sudden accidentally, and she was 43. So it just seemed like easy and doable. And then it wasn't. And then it wasn't. And it was an extremely painful time, and it's one of those things that is, it's impossible to even relay how much of life is impacted by not being able to start a family when you want one. And I just, I felt very confused. All my life I had been very worried about if I could be pregnant, in terms of I was afraid. I was afraid of pregnancy. I was afraid of the physical changes. I was afraid of childbirth. And infertility made me feel as if those fears were the reason that I wasn't getting this. Like there was something wrong with me, that other women may not have feared it as much as me, and then it happened to them. Any kind of ambivalence or fear that I felt about becoming a mother suddenly felt like in 3D, well, this is what you get for daring to have those thoughts. And I think, ultimately, my journey in infertility was shrouded in silence and a sense of isolation from others, and tons of Googling, hours and hours of Googling and reading, searching for answers, searching for help, searching for support, and usually coming up with nothing and feeling very alone in the world with it. Feeling left out of my friends and their lives, and feeling embarrassed, feeling betrayed by my body, feeling betrayed by my religion, and feeling angry that I was not getting what I wanted, and feeling incredibly sad that something that is supposed to happen, that comes from love and commitment between two people, which was something that I didn't take for granted, coming from a broken home and coming from past relationships that were troublesome and hard, for me to get to a point where I was well enough to pick the right person and to settle down and to imagine that I would want to commit my life to this person and to raising a family was so huge for me that to be denied it when I thought I had made it just in time felt like kind of a real slap in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To have that be denied to me, it still hurts, and it still makes me upset and angry. And yeah, that's, I mean, in a nutshell.
I mean, you used the word confusing, which really sums it up very well. It's something I certainly have experienced with myself, and on my journey with childlessness, or coming to terms with being in the position I'm in. And I remember, so for me, I felt like, and this is something I got from my dad as well, bless him, I love my dad to bits. But traditionally, culture, for me, my dad kind of presented this formula, and that's how I describe it. It's like, if you do this, do this, do this, you'll get this. So for me, or for us as kids, especially being first generation British, it was get educated, get a good job, get married, have kids. And it's all supposed to happen in that order. And in a lot of respects, I felt religion was giving us that same formula. You do it right. You pray for the husband, you get, so God brings him to you, then you pray for the child and God gives it to you, and you're blessed, and there you go, voila, ta-da, it all works. And then all of a sudden it doesn't. And I remember spending my 20s being afraid of getting pregnant, because we were told you're sent to university to get a career and don't get pregnant. We had a lot of, this is a real Caribbean thing, is don't bring shame on the family. So getting pregnant outside of wedlock was a huge thing. And I had friends at the time, I remember in my 20s, I had friends that their family shunned them because they got pregnant. Don't talk to your sister anymore because she's brought shame on the family, and she's ousted, we've cut her off, that's it, end of story. And I didn't want to be that person. I really didn't want to have that. Not my family wouldn't have done that to me, because my dad wasn't that person anyway, but I had a real sense of it was the wrong thing to do and it shouldn't happen. So when I got the formula right, and especially in my 20s, I did have 2 terminations, and I wasn't in relationships. So then I did pray that everything would be right one day. And I got married at 39. And I never expected to get married. And we tried for a year or for 3 years, and it didn't happen. And I was like, what's going on? I got it all right. Why isn't this working? And it made no sense. and shame and confusion were two of the things that I remember thinking at the time, or feeling at the time, because it really didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It feels like it's something that's like, it should be a given, you know, and we're taught from so early on to be so careful as girls, as women, to not have this happen to us by accident,
Yeah.
because it will ruin your life.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know, there's nothing that will ruin your life faster than a baby. And so, you know, the idea that when you're finally responsible enough to do it right, that you should be denied it was very frustrating. Very frustrating and agonizing and shocking, really shocking. I mean, it is, I don't know where I read this, but that it's up there with the major stressors of life, like death and divorce and things like that, that infertility is seen as a major stressor, and yet nobody really discusses it, and nobody can imagine it can happen to them, kind of thing. If you were to ask me, like, will you, is it likely that you could be infertile in your future? If you asked me that, I would have been like, what? Why? No.
Yeah. What? How? Why would you say that? We would have been insulted. Someone would, No, it is. Even that, and you know, I have family members. I remember there are, you know, aunts and cousins who don't have children. But again, there's no sense of what that was all about either, other than we just know they didn't have children. So isn't it strange? And as you said so rightly, it doesn't get talked about. It's not acknowledged, and it's not going to be you.
Yeah.
You know, all I knew is I wasn't going to be her.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So, you know, for those of you who don't know, Ruth has written an article, and it was published in the Israeli newspaper called Beshiva. Have I got that right?
No.
I got that right. I did my research.
You were so close. The article that I wrote was published in worldchildlessweek.net.
Okay. Yeah. I read it was adapted for World Childless Week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I basically submitted it to them, to her, you know, to me first. And then what you're talking about, the newspaper in Israel, Besheva, is what I'm paraphrasing in the beginning of my article.
Right.
That's a quote from the article that inspired me to write my article.
So my question around that is two things. Is one, can you give us a brief overview of the article, but also what inspired you to write that article?
Yes. So I wrote that article because I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. I came to the end of my rope of reading articles and being exposed to things that just were so absurd and so infuriating and so just deaf to, you know, the reality that I was living, that I felt like I was ready to say what I thought. And I had been imagining one day writing something or speaking about my experience, but it was really the deadline to have to submit to World Childless Week that got me moving. And it was really that article that I read that made me so upset, that was like the force behind what I wrote. The article, basically, it was a very short little article, and it was basically a miracle story in the newspaper of a woman who was childless, went to a rabbi, a well-respected and well-known rabbi in Israel, and asked him, you know, what's the deal? I'm childless, give me some advice. And the rabbi's advice was, God is not an ATM. And, you know, that's it. And she was like very humbled and she, oh, okay. And she walked away. And then he said, wait, I have a suggestion. Why don't you try to do good deeds above and beyond what you need to, so that maybe God will pay attention to what you're doing, and he'll do something that is above and beyond what he needs to. because God doesn't owe any of us anything in this life. God doesn't owe you a baby. So maybe if you do something that you don't owe for someone else, you go above and beyond in your good deeds for someone else, maybe God will see that and then grant you what he doesn't owe you, which is a baby. And lo and behold, the woman heard this information. She went and she volunteered at a maternity ward. And not only did she have a baby, but she had twins. Yeah. And then she had another baby, or maybe that was reversed. Maybe she had the baby and then twins. I can't remember. But in any case, it was like a 3-time miracle. And it was just so insane that it should be published, you know, and for all to say, you know, God is great. Look how great God is. Look how this woman's experience shows us that if we just do something better, if we become better people, if we do the right things, then God will see and God will grant us whatever it is that we want. And to me, that's a lie.
Yeah.
And, you know, I never imagined wanting to or needing to speak up and say that's a lie. That's not true. That's not my experience. And I felt suddenly like, you know, if this woman's experience is getting validated in print, so should my experience.
You know, I think that's such a powerful thing, you know, that statement, this is a lie. I just, you know, I think about Christianity and the messages that come across, which is essentially pretty much the same as what you've just spoken about. You know, it's all this about praying and in a way doing good deeds, sowing, you reap what you sow. And, you know, there's so many messages that are telling us that we did the wrong thing, we didn't want it enough, we didn't believe enough, or we didn't deserve it. That is so destructive and silencing. You know, and my worry, I mean, I was in a place where I felt like I want to scream too. And I wanted to shout out, we matter too. And I really wanted to be heard. And I wanted other women around me in this, who were childless not by choice, to be heard too. And I could see, and it worries me that being in a religious setting, that there are women there that are in a way suffering in silence or just in denial. Because even if they're not thinking, God, I'm not doing enough, or they don't feel like I'm not worthy to be a mum, they've flipped it around to say, this isn't God's will for me, so therefore I will go on and do other things. It really reminds me of a story my friend told me, who's Muslim, and she had told me, now she's in her 60s, and she heard me talk maybe 2 years ago, and quite early on she came up to me and she told me her story of her childless journey, but then part of that is not dealing with the grief, or not going really through the grief as we know it, because in her mind, it wasn't God's plan for her. And she, because of the work she was doing, thought she could mother in that way. And that's what God had created for her to do. And hey, I'm happy now, it's all okay, I just go and do that. And then later on, when I spoke, she was like, oh my God, I'm really sad about this. But never had the opportunity to grieve before, because she believed in the God has other plans for me story.
It's almost, I feel really moved hearing that story, because it's almost like you're not allowed to say, you know, if there is a plan that God made, I don't like the plan.
Yeah.
this idea of what's best for me, I don't like it, and I'm mad about it. And I'm allowed to say that I'm mad about it, and I'm allowed to be outraged. And, you know, I'm not an expert on anything regarding Islam, but I do know that there is the idea of maktub in Islam, which means it's written, it's all written already. Your life is preordained. So whatever happens, that's God's will, period. Yeah. In Judaism, we have an idea that everything is written, but you have power by your actions, like prayer, like, your good deeds, like, whatever. You have some power to control how your life plays out. There are infinite possibilities in terms of how life can play out, but you do have a measure of control around it. And we petition God and we say to God, hey, I want this thing. And then we do something about it if God's not giving it to us. And in that way, we're in relationship. It's not just like, that's it, this is your fate, boom, you're done. No discussion, there's no hope for you, that's it. It's really, wait, I want to petition God, you know, and the Bible, the Torah, is full of stories of people who argued with God, you know, the famous stories of, was it Abraham who argued with God about like, hey, don't destroy this entire city based on a few sinners. What about the 10 righteous people? What if there's 10 righteous people here? And he argued with God, and God listened. And so those are and he ended up not destroying, right? Or I don't remember the whole story, but the point is that the idea that the idea of we have power to influence. God is listening. God is part of our world. God is influencing our lives, and we have a relationship with him. And he didn't just make the world, make your destiny, and leave you. He is here. He's here, and you just need to contact him, right? That's the idea. So in a certain way, I feel like it makes it even more frustrating that supposedly there was a measure of control, and supposedly my prayers were supposed to influence God, and supposedly I was supposed to show that I was earnest and do good things and be a good person, and if I do those things, he's supposed to listen.
Yeah.
He's supposed to listen to me and see that, you know, I'm worthy. And what this rabbi's advice essentially said was, you're not really worthy as you are.
Yeah, you're not good enough. And then you have to do extra stuff. Yeah.
And the idea of linking together worthiness and fertility is extremely problematic, and I feel very dangerous, because it implies to people that fertility comes to those who are good. Good things come to those who are good. And, you know, it's like an age-old question, why do bad things happen to good people? If it were so obvious that if I do something good, I'm going to get everything good, then everybody would just do good. And, you know what I mean? And it would just be good.
Yeah.
But the world doesn't operate under those rules. We don't know. There is no cause and effect that we can understand as people. And, you know, maybe in the next world we'll understand it. But certainly in this world, we have no idea why the horrible things that happen when they shouldn't happen. And so this rabbi implying that she can petition God with and impress him with good deeds, and then that it worked, not just, you know, and it worked so big, it worked so well for her, flies in the face of like, well, and if I did that and it didn't work for me, then what are you really saying? Because when it comes down to it, if you do the right things and you get what you wanted, great. Then that worldview suits your experience. But when you're a good person and you don't get what you want, even if you petition God for it, then the worldview of, you know, God is listening, God cares about your experience, right? It doesn't work anymore. And it's hard to reconcile that somehow someone else is more worthy of becoming a parent than you are, just simply based on this kind of arbitrary go do volunteer work, go pray. As it implies that any amount of prayer that you've already done is not enough. Any good deeds are not enough. And when you look around in the world and you see terrible people having children, or you see people who have no business having children, who aren't ready, who aren't responsible, who are abusive, who are pedophiles, who are God knows what, you realize none of that makes any
Yeah.
sense. And yet it's perpetuated again and again that if you just pray and if you just do good, and when it works for you, like I said, it probably feels very wonderful and the universe makes sense. But when it doesn't work for you, then your universe falls apart and everything that you once believed and hoped and held to be true falls apart. You know, it's very hard to reconcile with a sense of betrayal, you
Yeah.
know, around that, especially, you know, for me coming to religious belief later in life. You know, I wasn't raised with religious beliefs. So for me, it was very much a choice, very much a longing to connect with the God of Judaism that I learned about and wanted to connect with. So having done everything so right to then be slapped down while others were gaining around me made no logical sense. And, you know, I think it's a problematic thing that is unfortunately very, very common, and not only in the, you know, in the margins of the Jewish world, but in the Jewish world in general. Do you know what I mean? It's not just like the extreme ends who are saying these things. It's very mainstream, this kind
Yeah.
of thinking, like just pray, it'll all be okay. Don't worry, God makes miracles. Pointing at the matriarchs. Look, Sarah didn't get a baby until she was in her 90s.
I mean, there's a lot of things you're saying that, I don't know, in a way, I feel my anger coming back. You know, I was brought up as a Catholic and I went into Christianity. So I think in my late 20s. Now, I still consider Catholicism as Christian, being a Christian. So even though I'm a Catholic, I will still consider myself being a Christian. But in the traditional sense of Christianity, like Pentecostal Baptist, under a different umbrella, I went into that forum, into that platform in my late 20s. And I completely understand the comfort religion gives, because there are times when, yeah, it was beautiful. You know, it really comforted in me in my darkest times. It really helped me to be able to stand strong because of certain situations. But what I recognized from it was that it allowed me to hide and it allowed me to be in denial. So I didn't grieve my childlessness while I was in the church, but just thinking of the experience I had before I went, and therefore, for example, I'd had my terminations before I'd gone to church, and I'd got into the environment hating myself and being very ashamed of who I'd become. So it was all this, you know, God's taken away your sins, he's washed it away, you're new again. So therefore, I didn't have to deal with that. I didn't have to deal with my past. I was a new person. I could start all over again. And that was great until it wasn't great. And a lot of what you had described, you know, I just remember being in this place where I felt like I wasn't worthy anymore. That if I, you know, if in somebody's eyes I wasn't doing the right thing, or in my eyes I felt like I was doing the right thing and praying, but I still wasn't getting the blessings that I should be getting because that's what I saw other people getting. It really hurt to be there. It really hurt to the point where I had to walk away because I couldn't survive. I couldn't survive with that feeling. So for me, I describe this as redefining who God meant for me, because I just needed to do that. I needed to know that he wasn't punishing me. He wasn't turning his back on me. He didn't hate me. He didn't dislike me. I needed to know that his love was there. But I think, just thinking about some of what you said, it wasn't about I had to do good deeds or had to do something or had to follow a formula to get his love. He created me, so he loved me anyway. And if he knew who I was, as the Bible says, I knew you when you were formed in your mother's womb. If he knew that, none of what I've done is a surprise. Why would he dislike me or turn his back on me for exercising or working in the ability that he gave me the ability to do? So then when it came to my childless journey, I didn't suffer in the same way because I already knew this, but I also had people coming back kind of saying to me, you know, it's God's will, God knows best, God knows what he's doing, which really hurt. It really hurt, and it went a long way to putting me back in that I'm not good enough box and silencing me. And I found it really difficult to climb out of that box again and say, well, no, that is a lie. That really is a lie. This is not what God is about, you know. And I also hear, I think when I think about what you're saying and reading the article that you wrote, I do hear the hurt in that, and I do hear the frustration in your words. And I wonder what message you wanted to give to not just childless women, because it's really important other childless women are hearing this so that they can know that they matter too and that it's okay. But also people who are not childless, the parents. I wonder what message you wanted to get across with your article.
That's a great question, and I really struggled with that when I was writing it. And I realized that the message was really one of, you know, you should listen to what childless women are saying, because while you might have children, your children might struggle with infertility. And that's the most important thing. So if their children, you know, there's that statistic, and what is it, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, whatever that statistic is, it's likely, it could happen that your child will be faced with infertility and will experience what I've just described. So if you care about your children, you will listen to me, and you will take measures and stand shoulder to shoulder with me to improve the situation, the standing, to eliminate the stigmatization and the marginalization and the silencing, because you wouldn't want your children to have to go through this. Even if you don't care about me and you're tired of hearing my story, listen up, because this could happen to your children or to your grandchildren one day. And you're going to want better for them than what I've experienced. You're going to want the Jewish community to be better for them. And that's really the message, is that we need to bring this out of the shadows. We need to destigmatize. We need to make it not a taboo subject. We need to be more inclusive. We need to be more welcoming. We need to have education around this. Not only fertility education, but also infertility education. And there needs to be sensitivity across the board that not everybody is going to have a family. Not everybody is going to get married. Not everybody is going to become a parent. And if you want people to stay engaged with Jewish life and with the Jewish community, you need to be aware so that you don't lose fantastic people from the community who don't feel welcome and who don't feel embraced and who don't feel wanted or the least bit important. You know, it's a huge loss, and it needs to be recognized as a loss. When very, very smart people walk away, or very, very hurt people walk away from the community, you know, or feel terrible, it should matter.
Yeah.
You know, it should matter.
Do you know, one of the things I remember, I did a talk, it was 2 or 3 years ago, and I was earlier on in my journey when I was talking and speaking up about my experience. And I remember this woman coming up to me and saying she now knows how better to support her friends from what I was saying. And you saying about the fact that parents might not become grandparents, you know, or one of their children. You know, I know siblings that neither of them have children, and they're the only 2 children. So, you know, there is a reality that parents won't become grandparents. There is a reality that parents, with all the kids they have, one of them might struggle with fertility, might not have children. And I think it's so, as you said, it is so important that they hear these messages, these stories, so they're better equipped to have the conversations and they're better equipped to support. I know, I was just thinking, I remember, because I interviewed a couple of other women for this platform around race and religion as well. And I remember a friend of mine, Krista, saying, the Bible is full of stories. And for her, it was about how to live her life. It gave her examples of, you know, crap happens, and the stories in the Bible show us actually we can get through them. We can, go through adversity and come out the other end and be okay. And this is exactly what we're doing too. We're giving stories so people know actually we can still have a fulfilling life without children. We will be okay, but there's a journey we have to go through. We have to go through all the grief. And I think the fixing stuff, especially in religion, really, really doesn't help. I think religion is a beautiful place. The community is a beautiful place to have support and comfort and an acknowledgement of stuff so that we can work through healing. It is not there to fix us. And that's the problem I have with it.
Right. I mean, for me, I feel like the community became a place that I feared. I feared being there. I feared being looked at as different. I feared being pitied. I feared being shamed. I feared the confused looks on people's faces when they looked down at my stomach and saw that there was nothing there. I became somebody who couldn't just sit and listen to the sermon or to enjoy the singing or to connect with God because I was so distracted by the babies everywhere, the women with babies, the pregnant women, the focus in communal life in Judaism. I don't know if this is the same in Christianity, but the focal point, the high point of Jewish life, where Jewish life happens, is in the home. Going to synagogue is something that up until recently only men did anyway. And where Jewish life happened was in the home, the rituals inside the home, the rituals you do with your children, the rituals you pass on to them. That was what kept the traditions alive and well. And everything to do with family life is priority number one. Therefore, it's the biggest tragedy when someone does not marry and does not have children. There's no tragedy like that, it's horrible. And I guess, while I understand that it will always be and always needs to be the focal point of Jewish life, I also feel that in order for it to be something that is truly strong and remains attractive to a growing population of Jewish people who are disconnected from their religion, who aren't practicing their religion, if it wants to be attractive, if it wants people to stay in the fold, so to speak, then it needs to be a safe place. It needs to be a welcoming place where you really do feel that you're seen and you're included and you're worthy and you deserve to be there and you belong to the Jewish people no less than the woman with 10 children.
Yeah.
And until that happens, until people with children or people, of any kind of difference, of any kind of othering, feel that they are as celebrated as other members of the community who are bringing in grandchildren or bringing whatever they're bringing, I think that it will always be a very stressful place for anybody who doesn't fit the square.
Yeah.
For anybody who didn't make it to that box where the ideal Jewish life is. We're always going to be the minority. We're always going to be the ones who are different from the majority of people. And yet I feel like, in the same way that we're taught in Judaism to care for the orphan, the widow, etc., we also need to care for those people who are childless, not by choice, those people who are single, those people who don't fit the normative pieces of Jewish life, and we need to be aware and sensitive. And I really hope that the article will get into the hands of people in the Jewish community, Jewish leaders, who have the power to start inviting in more discussion and more inclusion and more consciousness raising, essentially. Because while they're always, Judaism will always hold a value of family. That will never change. And it shouldn't change. It should be a very important value for our nation. But there also needs to be room for when things don't happen in the way that they should happen. And there needs to be a shift, a consciousness shift in the way infertility is spoken about, in the way, so that these people's grandchildren in the future, 50 years from now, won't have to read these ridiculous articles and feel the way I felt. My hope is that, society will improve, that we'll learn, that we'll become more aware, more sensitive, and that they won't have to deal with that. That if they end up being, childless not by choice in the future, that they'll be able to feel fine going to synagogue, speaking to their rabbi, speaking openly in the community, feeling that they can be part of Jewish life no less than anyone else.
Yeah.
And that they're just as valuable in the Jewish world. And while that is the idea, that's the philosophy, certainly no one will say to your face, you're not as valuable. But until the experience of people is that is the truth, I think we've got a ways to go until we get there. Yeah.
But there's a saying around, bearing witness to the experience or validating the experience leads to healing. So, we bear witness to it, we validate it, it can lead to healing. And everything you're talking about is saying that. It's saying that, we have to just normalize the fact that this thing is actually happening all the time. It's all around us. We are not unusual we might be in the minority, but we're not unusual. It's not the first time a woman is coming and saying, I never had a child, I couldn't give birth, or I couldn't conceive. So as you said, why can't these conversations need to be had? They really do. And I think it's really important for rabbis, I'd say priests, anyone in that place of authority, to be able to understand the hurt and destruction that can come from the messages they give and the advice they give and the fixing they want to do. Just embrace, spiritual hugs if you can't do a physical one, but just to validate the experience and embrace, actually, this is where somebody is, and guide them to the support and help that they need. I mean, for anyone who hasn't read Ruth's article, you got to read it. All of this is in there. There's so much. I really wanted to read loads of bits, but I'm running out of time. And I don't know, for those of you who are there, look, I've highlighted all this stuff that really jumped out at me. And just reminding me.
Like what jumped out at you? Like one thing?
There's so many. There's things like experiencing a psychological death. Being childless means experience a psychological death, identity crisis. These are such powerful words. A crushing heartbreak. It means always feeling different. This bit, being childless, is to hurt inside, to feel confused, sad, deprived, disappointed, angry, depressed, outraged, bitter, anxious, numb, despairing, resentful, betrayed, jealous, frustrated, criticized, judged, self-conscious, insecure, cursed, guilty, ashamed, shamed, blamed, afraid, lonely, lost. I mean, oh my God, you've probably, every childless woman listening to this is probably going, yeah, that's me. If it's not all of them, there's at least one thing in there that they've experienced themselves.
If I could leave, if I could say something to the Jewish world, to the rabbis, it would be to make an effort to have the discussion led by women like myself or like yourself, not by them. In other words, unless you have the lived experience, it's very difficult to really understand the ins and outs of something until you've really lived through it. And you are not only living through it, but you deal with the consequences. Like you have to live it. It's not just that you heard because, you have people come to your office and tell you stories. but because you really understand. And I think that was one of the most painful things, was that everyone there was to talk to was somebody who had 4+ children already and had no basis for which to understand the agony and the pain that we were going through. And the suggestions, while they weren't as absurd as the one that I wrote the article about, the suggestions also weren't coming from, there really is nothing offered. Do you know? There's nothing that can really be offered, because ultimately Jewish life celebrates life cycle events. They celebrate birth, they celebrate marriage, and that's what's celebrated. So if you never get married, or if you get married but you never have a child, the community will never have a reason to acknowledge you or celebrate you or recognize you for anything. And that is a horrible thing, because being celebrated in the Jewish community is one of the most fulfilling things that there is. I mean, you're embraced in such a way. People are dancing and singing around you and wishing you good things. And it's just the most life-affirming, wonderful experience, you know, to have a community around you saying, we're so happy for you. And to recognize that there are people among you who will never get that experience. And it's not right that they should sit their entire lives in the Jewish community without anyone ever wishing them mazal tov, which is what we say, you know, without anyone wishing them good. Sure, they wish them good in the sense of like, I hope you get married soon, or good luck with that. But to have an entire community, to have the rabbi stand there and say, and we want to celebrate the engagement or the marriage or the new baby, and have hundreds of people burst into energy and song and dance. There's nothing like that. And everyone deserves to have that.
The true celebration of life.
Their lives. Everyone deserves to have that. And if they don't have that from the things that are the basic things that supposedly everyone's going to get them around, then there needs to be some other way. And it's on the religious communities to recognize that they're leaving out portions of people. In the Jewish world, there is a crisis around marriage. There are many, many older singles who are not married and who may never get married. And there's a crisis happening. And to ignore all of that, you know, and to make it be just about like, let's try to figure out how to marry people. There are going to be people who won't get married. So how will you honor them? How will you make everyone in here feel that they are part of the Jewish nation and that they are worthy and they matter and that you care that they're there, that it matters if they show up or if they don't? Because if they don't feel they matter, then they're going to stay home. And they're not going to partake. They're not going to be part of the Jewish nation. And that's a real loss, because there's not that many of us, and we need every one of us, you know? And I think that that's just something I'd really like to drive home, is like the rabbis really need to make an effort to learn about this subject of childless not by choice from people who have experienced it, and not just from books and not just from theoretical things. But really from people, and to make space for that experience.
Yeah. Do you know, I think honoring life is exactly what it is. I think that was so beautifully said. We should be celebrating life, not just all the good stuff, you know, the celebrations. And I'd say that in Christianity too. You know, they get people to come up and talk about the blessings and how God has blessed them and all this stuff, you know, because they did it all right. And actually, we're alive and we matter and our lives are amazing.
That's the thing, is that we celebrate people and their blessings. So what does that mean about everybody else? That we're all cursed? Yeah. And that's the sensation, that's the feeling that it gives when you see somebody have their 10th child and you're struggling to have one, and you see the community once again whooping it up for them. You're just like, what is going on here? And
what I would say, because I remember hearing somebody say to me once that God withholds certain blessings until you're married, and I'm sure that could be extended to a whole array of experiences in life. But, you know, what about it just is? What about why isn't my life valuable because I haven't accomplished the marriage or the child or the this or the this or the this? It really is about just it, you know, it just is life. We are people who are amazing in our own rights. We're just amazing, and I think there's so much value in shouting that out at the rooftops and actually having that acknowledged and celebrated.
Yeah, I think the main thing is the reason that it's not is because there's a huge focus on lineage. There's a huge focus on leaving behind and continuing your family tree and passing on, at least in Judaism, passing on these old traditions that have been part of the reason that we've survived as long as we have. So there is this sense of like, you know, there is nothing except that. That is the most important thing. But ultimately, if there's nothing else acknowledged in a person, if there's no reason to ever honor a person except for if they get married or if they have a baby, then the message that's sent out is only those people count. And that's a terrible message to send.
Yeah. I think because we are running out of time, I just wanted to kind of draw this to a close. One of the things that I read, and to quote you, was worthiness should play no part in any conversation about childlessness. You know, and I think that message has come out so much in what you have said today. You know, for me, when I think of people like Maya Angelou bearing an untold story inside of us, we all have a story that really needs to be heard. You know, Brené Brown talks about, you know, when we talk about our stories, we can actually write a brave new ending. And I certainly talk about changing the language so we can have different conversations. So I'm really grateful that actually you are here to share your story. You are here. You sounds like you're writing your own brave new ending, and thank you for being brave enough to have a different conversation so that we could just look at this on a different level and again change the language of the experiences that we're having.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for having me. It's so new for me to talk about childlessness, and you've made it so comfortable for me to do so. So I really, really thank you. It's been very eye-opening also for me. So thank you. I'm grateful.
So thank you as well. And for now, I will say goodbye, but I will be in touch again soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.